Cassidy Flynn's hands shook, but not from the cold. The blood on his shirt wasn't his. Behind him, the ranch house stood with its door ripped off its hinges, wood splintered and twisted from the violence. Inside, his father lay on the floor, breathing in shallow, ragged gasps, each one a struggle against broken ribs and pride. 3 hours earlier, everything had been normal. Cassidy had been mending fence by the creek when 7 riders appeared over the rise, dust swirling behind them like a warning. They didn't ask twice. When Gideon Flynn said no, they made sure he understood what no meant in their world, with fists, boots, and the kind of cruelty that leaves scars deeper than bone. But what they didn't know, what they couldn't know, was that some debts run deeper than blood, and Cassidy was about to collect one. 2 days before, Gideon had stood at the edge of their land, staring at the horizon like he always did when trouble brewed. For 40 years, he'd raised cattle on this land, from the cottonwoods to the red hills, through droughts and blizzards, through silence and sacrifice. Honest work, simple life. But lately, men in clean clothes with dirty intentions had circled, demanding he sell. "The territory's changing," they'd say, voices slick with false concern. Gideon's answer never changed. "This land isn't for sale." Most ranchers kept their distance from the Apache, not Gideon. Once or twice a year, warriors would ride in, not as strangers but as guests. They'd sit by the fire, share stew, speak in low tones. They looked at him like he was a legend, a man who walked between worlds with honor intact. That morning, Cassidy heard the crack of wood on bone, his father's grunt of pain cutting through the calm. He ran, but arrived too late. A scar-faced man threw him down like trash. At the center stood their leader, cold eyes, trimmed beard, standing over Gideon, who knelt in the dirt, blood dripping from his split lip, ribs already caved in. "1 week," he said slowly, like explaining to a child. "Sign the papers, or we finish what we started." They rode off, leaving Cassidy alone with his broken father, whose eyes held something worse than pain: resignation. He thought it was over. But Cassidy remembered a story Gideon once told, half drunk by the fire on a winter night, about a boy swept away in a flash flood during spring thaw. A boy Gideon pulled from the churning water, carried 10 miles through mud and rain, and returned to his people barely breathing. A boy who grew up to lead. Cassidy made his choice. He saddled his horse, threw on a saddlebag with dried meat in a canteen, and took one last look at his father's battered form in the doorway. Then he turned toward the northeast hills, toward the Apache camp. 2 hard days' ride through land most men feared to cross. He didn't sleep that first night. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw his father's bloodied face, heard the thud of boots on bone. He pushed his horse through rocky passes and red clay creeks, past the split boulder and the sideways cottonwood, landmarks only he and his father knew. Then, smoke. Thin, controlled, rising behind a ridge. Cassidy raised one hand high and waited, just as his father had taught him. Show respect. Wait for them to come to you. A warrior appeared without sound, young, armed, eyes sharp. He studied Cassidy. The blood, the exhaustion, the desperation. Cassidy's throat was dry. His mind blanked on Apache words, so he said the only name that mattered: Natan. Recognition flickered in the warrior's eyes. He gestured. Cassidy dismounted and followed on foot through narrow stone corridors until the camp opened before him. And there, beside the flame, stood Natan, taller than most, gray threading his hair, scars mapping old battles across his arms like a living history. He saw Cassidy, and knew. Cassidy stopped 10 feet away. Voice breaking. "They beat him. My father. 7 men came. Wanted the land. He refused. So they broke him in front of me." Natan didn't flinch, didn't speak, just watched. Cassidy pressed on, desperate. "His ribs are shattered. They're coming back in 5 days, maybe less. If he's still alive, they'll kill him. I saw it in their eyes." Natan finally spoke, his English careful, precise. "Your father saved my son, pulled him from the flood when the waters rose, carried him home when he couldn't breathe. We do not forget debts like that." Relief nearly buckled Cassidy's knees. "But you ask for war," Natan added, gaze hardening. 7 men now, more later. "If we ride with you, there will be consequences. For us, for your father, for you." "They're already coming back," Cassidy said. "And if they find him, he's dead." Natan turned to the fire. Silence stretched so long Cassidy thought he'd failed. Then he spoke in Apache. His voice carried across the camp like thunder. Warriors stepped forward. One, then another, then dozens. They formed a line behind him. Faces set, eyes sharp, ready. "We ride at dawn," he said in English. "But understand this, boy. Once we show our strength, the world will know the Apache stand with your family. That protection comes with a price, respect, honor. Your father knows this, do you?" Cassidy nodded, throat too tight to speak. They rode hard 2 days. 400 warriors moving with discipline that defied their numbers. No shouts, no chaos. Just the steady thunder of hooves and Natan's hand guiding them like a conductor. On the second night, they camped within sight of the Flynn ranch. Cassidy saw the broken door hanging crooked in the moonlight. His chest clenched. Was his father still alive? He started toward the house, but Natan's hand held him back. "Not yet. We wait for dawn. Your father's held this long. A few more hours won't break him." At first light, Natan positioned his warriors in a wide, invisible ring, behind rocks, in creek beds, along the tree line. From the house you'd see nothing, but look closer. A rifle glint here, a crouched figure there, death waiting in silence. Cassidy was allowed to approach the house, flanked by 2 warriors. Inside, Gideon lay where he'd left him, but awake. His eyes flickered with fear, then relief when he saw his son. "You fool," Gideon whispered. "You went to them." "They're here, Pa." Natan brought 400. Gideon closed his eyes. "God help us, Cassidy. Do you know what this means?" Before Cassidy could answer, a warrior hissed, "Riders, 7 horses. Same men, same arrogance." Their leader, cold eyes, trimmed beard, smiled as he dismounted. "Flynn, time's up, old man. Hope you've come to your senses." They walked toward the house, 20 feet. 15, 10, boots crunching on dirt. Smiles easy, cruel. Then, as if the earth itself rose in judgment, 400 warriors stood. In one breath, the 7 men were surrounded, a perfect, unbreakable circle of rifles, arrows, and silent fury. The leader's smile vanished. His hand moved toward his pistol, then stopped when he realized how useless it would be. Natan stepped forward. "You beat an old man. You threatened to kill him if he didn't give you his land. You thought he was alone. You thought he was weak." The leader's eyes darted around, calculating odds that didn't exist. "This is between us and Flynn. This doesn't concern you. You made it our concern when you touched a man who saved my son's life. That debt is sacred. Men like you don't understand honor." The scar-faced rider lunged for his rifle. Thwip, thwip, thwip. 3 arrows struck the ground at his feet. A warning. Next ones wouldn't miss. Cassidy stepped onto the porch, Gideon's rifle in hand. The leader's eyes locked onto him, and something shifted. Recognition, understanding. The boy had done this. "You have 1 week to leave," the man stammered, grasping at control. "That was the deal." "No," Natan cut him off. "You leave now, and you never return. Not tomorrow, not next week, not ever. Because if you do, if any of you come within sight of this ranch again, you won't leave alive." The threat hung in the air. Absolute and final. The leader opened his mouth, closed it. For the first time, Cassidy saw real fear in those cold eyes. Fear and something worse. The humiliation of being utterly, completely outmatched. "You can't stay here forever," he said quietly. But the conviction was gone. Natan smiled. And it was not a kind expression. "You think this ends when we ride away? You think we're just here for today? These men will remember your faces. If anything happens to Gideon Flynn, if he has an accident, if his house burns down, if he disappears, we will know. And we will come for you. Not 400 of us, all of us. Every warrior from every camp. We will hunt you across this territory until there's nowhere left to hide." The silence that followed was total. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. The leader looked at his men, then back at Natan. Pride versus survival. Greed versus the certainty of death. It took him less than 5 seconds to choose. "Mount up," he said, voice barely above a whisper. They climbed back on their horses slowly, hands visible, movements careful. The circle of warriors parted, creating a path eastward away from the ranch. The 7 riders moved through the gap, and Cassidy watched them go. Watched them ride faster and faster until they were nothing but dust on the horizon. But even as they disappeared, he knew this wasn't quite over, because men like Harlan Briggs don't forgive humiliation easily. Somewhere out there beyond the hills, they were already deciding what came next. Natan's warriors stayed for 3 days. They set up camp around the ranch, posting guards and shifts, watching every approach. This wasn't just protection, it was a message. Anyone passing by would see the Apache presence and understand. The Flynn ranch was under their shield. Word would spread fast. Inside the house, 2 Apache women tended to Gideon with herbs and wrappings, setting his broken ribs with careful precision. Cassidy watched them work, amazed by their knowledge. His father drifted in and out of consciousness, but each time he woke, he seemed a little stronger. On the 2nd day, he managed to sit up. On the 3rd, he spoke in full sentences. "You took a hell of a risk," Gideon said that evening, his voice still rough with pain. "Riding alone to their camp, you could have been killed before you got close enough to speak." "I didn't have a choice." "Ha! They were going to come back and finish you." Gideon nodded slowly, eyes on Natan, who stood outside with his warriors. "We're bound to them now, more than before. This wasn't just one man saving a child. This was a tribe going to war for us. That kind of debt doesn't get paid back with a handshake and a thank you." Before Cassidy could ask what that meant, a sharp whistle cut the air. Riders approaching, not 7 this time, just 1. Natan moved to the window, rifle ready. Cassidy recognized the horse first, one of Briggs's men, the youngest, probably not even 20. He rode slowly, hands visible and empty, a white cloth tied to his saddle horn. Natan stepped outside. Cassidy followed. The young rider stopped 30 feet from the house, eyes wide at the number of warriors surrounding him. He swallowed hard. "I'm not here to fight. I'm here with a message from Harlan Briggs." "Then deliver it and leave," Natan said. The rider nodded quickly. "Mr. Briggs wants you to know he's leaving the territory. Him and the others. Heading east. He said to tell you he understands the arrangement. The Flynn ranch will be left alone." Cassidy felt a surge of relief. But Natan's expression didn't change. "Why should we believe him?" The young man shifted in his saddle. "The man who hired us, the one who wanted this land, he's dead." Heart gave out when he heard what happened here. "Without him, there's no money, no reason to stay. Briggs just wants to get out with his life." Natan studied him a long moment, then nodded once. "Go tell Briggs that if he's lying, if any harm comes to this family, we'll find him. East or west, north or south, we'll find him." The rider turned his horse and rode away fast, the white cloth snapping in the wind. Inside, Gideon had heard everything. He looked at his son with something that might have been pride. "It's over then?" "The immediate threat, yes," Gideon replied. "But Cassidy, you need to understand something. What you did, bringing the Apache here, showing that strength, it changes everything. Other men will think twice before crossing us. But it also means we can never break faith with Natan's people. We're connected now, for better or worse." That night, as the camp settled in around the ranch, Cassidy stood outside and watched the fires burning in the darkness. 400 warriors, all here because his father had once pulled a drowning boy from a flood. Because one act of courage years ago had created a bond stronger than fear. He thought about what his father said, about being connected, about debts that ran deeper than blood. And for the first time since this started, he felt something other than fear. He felt the weight of responsibility, of legacy, of understanding that some choices echo through time. On the 4th morning, Natan announced they would leave at dawn the next day. Gideon was strong enough to stand now, strong enough to walk short distances without help. The immediate danger had passed, and the warriors needed to return to their families, their hunting grounds, their own lives. Cassidy felt a strange emptiness at the thought of them leaving. For 3 days, the ranch had been filled with their presence, their strength. When they left, it would feel very quiet. That evening, as the sun dropped toward the hills, Natan found Cassidy near the corral, tending to the horses. The Apache leader stood silent for a moment, watching the boy work, then spoke. "Your father taught you well. I see his hands in how you move, how you care for things." Cassidy looked up, surprised. "He taught me everything I know." "He taught you more than ranching. He taught you about debts, about honor. Most men your age wouldn't have had the courage to ride into Apache territory alone. Most wouldn't have known to come at all. I was desperate. I didn't know what else to do. Desperation without wisdom gets men killed. You had both." Natan paused, choosing his words carefully. "The man who died, the one who wanted this land. Do you know why he wanted it so badly?" Cassidy shook his head. Natan gestured toward the eastern hills where the creek ran down from the high ground. "Water. In 3 years, maybe 5, the territories will need water more than gold. Your father's land sits at the source of 3 creeks that feed into the valley. Control this land. Control the water for 100 ranches downstream. The dead man understood that. He was going to buy up everything, charge people for what used to be free. Cassidy felt something cold settle in his chest. So it wasn't just about our ranch. It was never just about your ranch. You were the first. There would have been others. But now, because of what happened here, because those men ran instead of fought, the plan is finished. The dead man's partners will find easier prey elsewhere. How do you know all this? Natan smiled faintly. We watch, we listen. White men think we don't understand their schemes, their plans. They talk freely around us like we're stones or trees. They forget we have ears. They forget we pay attention. The two stood in silence for a while, watching the horses move lazily in the last light. Then Natan straightened, his tone shifting to something more formal. When we leave tomorrow, you'll be alone again. No 400 warriors watching your back. Some men might see that as weakness, as an opportunity, but you won't be alone. Not really. What happened here will be remembered. Stories will spread. And in those stories, people will learn that the Flynn family has friends who ride when called. That protection doesn't end just because we're not visible. Cassidy wanted to say thank you, wanted to express the gratitude that filled his chest, but the words felt too small for what he owed. Natan seemed to understand. He placed a hand briefly on Cassidy's shoulder, then walked away toward the campfires. Inside the house, Gideon sat by the window, watching the exchange. When Cassidy came in, his father gestured for him to sit. What did he tell you? Cassidy repeated the conversation, the revelation about the water, about the larger plan. Gideon nodded slowly, unsurprised. I suspected something like that. Land this good, this well-watered. Men have killed for less. He looked at his son, eyes serious. Cassidy, what you did saved more than just me. You saved this ranch, this legacy. But you also took on a responsibility. The Apache helped us because of an old debt. But now there's a new one between you and them, between us and Natan's people. Do you understand what that means? Cassidy thought about it, the weight of what his father was saying. It means we honor them. We stand with them if they need us. More than that, Gideon said softly. It means we become the kind of men worthy of that trust. He reached out and gripped his son's hand. You became that kind of man when you rode into their territory alone. Now you have to stay that kind of man every day for the rest of your life. Outside, the campfires burned lower as the warriors settled in for their last night at the Flynn ranch. Tomorrow they would ride back to their own lands, back to their own lives. But something fundamental had changed here. Something that couldn't be undone. A boy had faced impossible odds and won. And in winning, he'd learned that some victories come with a price. The price of becoming someone worthy of the help you received. Dawn came with the sound of horses being saddled, camps being broken. Cassidy stood beside his father near the house, watching as 400 Apache warriors prepared to leave. The efficiency was remarkable. Within an hour, all trace of their presence would be gone, except for the trampled grass and the stories that would spread across the territory. Natan approached them one last time. Gideon had insisted on standing for this, despite the pain it caused. The two men clasped forearms in the way of old friends. No words needed. Then Natan turned to Cassidy. You rode alone into our territory. You asked for help when you had nothing to offer but your father's old debt. That took more courage than most men show in their entire lives. He paused, then removed a small stone from the leather pouch at his belt. It was smooth, worn by water, marked with a single carved line. This belonged to my son, the one your father saved. He carried it until the day he died in battle 3 winters ago. I want you to have it. Cassidy took the stone, feeling its weight in his palm. I don't understand. You don't have to. Just know that when you look at it, you'll remember that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing what must be done despite the fear. You understand that now? Natan placed his hand briefly on Cassidy's shoulder, then turned and walked to his horse. The warriors mounted and formed their lines. Natan raised his hand once in farewell. And then they rode, 400 strong, back toward their territory. Cassidy and Gideon watched until the last rider disappeared over the hills. The silence that followed was profound. Well, Gideon said finally, his voice still rough, but stronger than it had been days ago. We've got work to do. That fence by the creek won't fix itself, and the horses need feeding. Cassidy looked at his father, saw the man who'd been beaten nearly to death now standing straight, ready to continue. Pa, you should rest. You're not healed yet. I'll rest when I'm dead. Right now I'm alive, and this ranch needs tending. Gideon started toward the corral, moving carefully but determined. Cassidy followed. But something had shifted. He found himself walking slightly ahead, opening the gate before his father reached it, checking the water trough without being asked. Small things, necessary things, the kind of things a man does when he understands his role. They worked through the morning, not talking much, just moving through the familiar rhythms of ranch work. By noon, Gideon needed to rest, and Cassidy helped him back to the house. As his father settled into the chair by the window, Cassidy brought him water and food. "You're different," Gideon observed, watching his son move with new purpose. "I had to grow up fast." "No," Gideon said gently. "You were already grown. You just didn't know it yet." He looked out the window toward the eastern hills. "What happened here, Cassidy? Word will spread. Men will know this ranch is protected, that we have allies who will ride if called. That protection will last as long as we honor it, as long as we remember what it cost and what it means." Cassidy nodded, understanding settling into his bones like stone. "I won't forget. I know you won't." Gideon's hand found the stone Natan had given his son, turning it over slowly. "This is yours now. This ranch, this legacy, the bonds we've built, all of it. I'll be here to guide you for as long as I can, but the responsibility is yours. You earned it when you rode alone into Apache territory. You proved it when you brought back an army to protect what matters." 3 weeks later, a rider came from the nearest settlement with news. Harlan Briggs and his men had been seen boarding a coach headed east. They'd sold their horses, their equipment, everything, and left the territory for good. The man who'd hired them was buried outside town, and his remaining partners had abandoned their plans entirely. The threat was over, not just delayed, not just postponed. Over. Cassidy stood in the yard of the Flynn ranch, watching the sunset paint the hills gold and red. His father was inside, nearly healed now, strong enough to work a full day again. The ranch was secure. The land was theirs, and would remain theirs, not just because of fences or rifles, but because it was protected by honor, by respect, by bonds that transcended blood. He touched the stone in his pocket, felt its smooth weight, and thought about the journey that had brought him here. A terrified boy who'd watched his father beaten. A desperate son who'd ridden into dangerous territory with nothing but hope. A young man who'd brought back 400 warriors and learned what it meant to carry a legacy worth defending. The Flynn Ranch would stand, and Cassidy Flynn would make sure it stood for reasons that mattered. Not just because it was land or water or wealth, but because it represented something his father had taught him, and the Apache had reinforced. That honor once given must be honored in return. That debts run deeper than gold. That some things are worth fighting for, and the fight never really ends. It just changes shape. He walked back toward the house as the last light faded, ready for whatever came next, because he understood now. You don't win by being the strongest or the richest or the most feared. You win by being the kind of man who keeps his word, honors his debts, and stands firm when others would run. That was the legacy, and he would carry it forward.